This episode of the podcast is again sponsored by OneSkin. That's become part of my morning routine. I'm trying to look a little less like an old leathery couch. At the core of OneSkin is their patented OS1 peptide, the first ingredient proven to target senescent cells, the root cause of wrinkles, crepiness, and the loss of elasticity. And I don't know anything about that, but it does make my skin feel good. Certified safe for sensitive skin, OneSkin products are free from over 1,500 harsh or irritating ingredients, dermatologist tested, and have been awarded the National Eczema Association Seal of Acceptance by the NEA, delivering powerful results without irritation. Born from over 10 years of longevity research, OneSkin's OS1 peptide is proven to target the cells that cause the visible signs of aging, helping you unlock your healthiest skin now and as you age. And for a limited time, OneSkin is making it even easier to stay consistent with up to 30% off your first 3 subscription orders when you use the code TRAVELER at oneskin.co/traveler. That's 30% off with code TRAVELER. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. And thanks to OneSkin for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Overwhelmed by investing?
If you're anything like us, the hardest part is getting started. That's why we created the Investing for Beginners podcast.
Our goal is to help simplify money so it can work for you.
We invite guests to demystify investing.
At least like the minimum 10% into the 401k.
I'm Dave Ahern.
And I'm Andrew Sather.
And we hope you join us on the Investing for Beginners podcast.
Amateur Traveler, episode 978. Today, Amateur Traveler talks about towering mountains and raging rivers, great French fries and mosques, blue-eyed blondes, and the gateway to K2 as we go to the region of Skardu in Pakistan. This is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler. Let's talk about Pakistan. I'd like to welcome back to the show James Schomburgk, who's come to talk to us about yet another interesting destination from his travels. James, I'm going to let you introduce this one because you pitched me someplace I'd never heard of.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I'm a long-time listener of your podcast and love it. I do a lot of travel, and I just came back from a place called Skardu in the northeast of Pakistan, right up in the high Himalaya and Karakoram and Hindu Kush. In fact, it's where the 3 biggest mountain ranges on Earth coalesce. And I heard a great podcast that you only just recently did on northern Pakistan. And I think for the sake of the 7 days that they tend to pick, he only discussed Baltistan, Gilgit-Baltistan, which is on the west side of Skardu. And whilst that's spectacular, and I was there as well, I won't go over it again because it was done so well. The east side is just as beautiful and, in fact, probably more accessible. And I think that's probably the best thing. If you're traveling by plane, if you choose that way, it's going to be a far easier trip than going to Gilgit, which is much more well-known than Skardu, because the access is a lot better.
All right. And why should someone go there other than the fact that nobody goes there?
That's one reason, I think, because it is really a step back into time. You're getting exposed to Baltistan culture, which is quite unique, very different to southern Pakistan. There's a lot of crossover to the Ladakhi people in India. It's very much Muslim, but very different Muslim. The peoples there are believed to have originated more from European and Iranian look. So a lot of them are blondes, a lot of them are blue eyes, green eyes. A lot of them would be looked as more like Scandinavians, to be honest. It was quite a shock to see people who look Scandinavian speaking with a Pakistani Indian accent. Also, it was just a very interesting culture, very proud of their culture and have some real beliefs that as we were up there, we got quite a few lectures by them about how they believe they should be a separate country. They believe they're very different to the rest of the culture. So that was fascinating. But why would you go there is love of nature. The mountains there are the second highest in the world. K2, the second highest mountain on Earth, is in the Skardu region. And I think there's something like 8,000 metre mountains. So some of the biggest mountains on Earth you're surrounded by. And The scenery is just magnificent. The food is very different. And for people who want to travel on a budget, it's also extremely cheap. It was probably the cheapest trip I've ever been on in my life.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
Food was high quality, very clean, very cheap. People were extremely friendly. I never once felt scammed. Because there's very little tourism, there isn't that, like you can experience other parts of Asia, some scamming attempts. Not once was there ever a feeling of being scammed. It's very hard to pay for anything, to be honest. Everybody wants to give it to you for nothing. They're incredibly generous people. So, look, it's the generosity of the people. I've got an absolute love for mountains. I've done Himalayas in Nepal, in India, and this would be just as spectacular, but without the crowds.
Excellent. What itinerary are you going to recommend for us here?
Yeah, I'm going to do a 7-day one just to keep it simple. You've got two major ways you can fly in. You can fly in via Islamabad, which I think your previous speaker did. And then he took the roads up through the Karakoram Highway, the infamous Karakoram Highway, which
Right.
I'll talk about on the end because it was worthy of a story. We didn't expect to be driving on that, but I'll explain that in a moment, but we ended up driving on it. Or you can fly into Karachi, which is a lot further south, but it has a lot more flights from Europe, from the States, from Australia. So there's a lot more access, and either way is fine. Islamabad is a great city. It's Pakistan light. It's their old capital city. And so if you want to go somewhere that doesn't feel like Pakistan, it's a great city. I've been to Islamabad, and I won't go talk about it now, but it is a good city. Karachi, however, is full on Pakistan. It's a mega city of 30 million people. The infrastructure is overflowing. It's not coping. It's a fascinating city. It's intense. If you want to get a feel of what Mumbai is like, it reminds me of Mumbai and Delhi in its chaoticness, which I didn't pick up at all in the north of Pakistan or in Islamabad. I get a bit of an adrenaline junkie when it comes to those cities. I don't mind that. I just don't like it for too long. But it's a fascinating city. Unfortunately, they've got a beautiful beach, massive beach that's never ending. But you can't swim in it because they pump all of the effluent from the 30 million people gets pumped directly out into the beach. And it's not a good smell. But we spent sunset out there, out on the beach, and that was fantastic. So I'll just give you a rough itinerary in Karachi. There's some beautiful old colonial English architecture. Pakistan, like India, was under colonial rule until 1947. And so there's still some vestiges, some beautiful old buildings left, which are in the heart of a city, which are definitely worth looking at. I've just got to list a couple. Frere Hall was built in 1865. It was Karachi's town hall. It's now a free museum. You can walk in and see some beautiful artwork from local Karachi artists. But the gardens surrounding are fantastic with fountains. You can see a lot of local people just hanging out by the grass, just relaxing because there's not many green areas in Karachi. We went to the markets, which, like a lot of Asian markets, are definitely worth doing. I went to one called the Empress Market. It's in an old building, again, a 19th century English building. And it had a meat market in one area, completely separated, very clean, selling a lot of organs that I would never ever touch in my life, as well as normal meat. I guess that's the biggest difference too when coming to food is that the Pakistanis, being primarily Muslim, enjoy their meat. So there's a lot more meat consumed than it would be in India. You can certainly eat vegetarian, but if you actually like meat, you're going to be in meat heaven in Pakistan for sure. The highlight of that first day was what they called the Mazar-e-Quaid. I'm sorry if I said it wrong, but the other name is the Jinnah Mausoleum. Muhammad Ali Jinnah was the founder of Pakistan and is treated with the same reverence as Gandhi and Nehru in India, and is still, from my understanding, a very high respect from the Indians too, and was very well respected by Gandhi. His mausoleum is in a 1960s style building surrounded by acres and acres of beautiful gardens and fountains. You can actually walk right up to his mausoleum, surrounded by very strong army presence. They'll even let you take a photo alongside the mausoleum, alongside his grave in this beautiful building. But one of the guides has to be alongside you, which makes for a great photo shot, to be honest, with their opulent their guards in their full regale that you can actually then take a photo with them, makes it actually a great photo. And they were lovely about it. We were bustled out very quickly, though, because one of the ministers was coming with a minister from another nation. So they said, you got 10 minutes to take your photo, smile, and then have to leave. But that was just timing. The other things that we really enjoyed was the last one I'll mention before the beach is the Mahatma Palace Museum. And that was designed by the Aga Khan and was donated to them. It's in a beautiful area called Clifton, which is where the rich people live near the beach in Karachi.
Mhm.
And it was this summer house of the Mahatma family, who were very wealthy. And in fact, Jinnah's sister ended up living there as well. It's a beautiful old building. Reminds me of being in Rajasthan, very much Rajasthani type, that Mughal architecture. And the museum was fascinating, again, looking at the history of the founding of Pakistan. So it was a really nice, very relaxed place to visit. We finished off the day, and even though I said it stank, our driver knew part of the area where it wouldn't stink as much, and that's Clifton Beach, where you can go down to the beach. And the beach is, look, the sand would be, it was a very unusual sand. It was like very compacted grey sand. It was a very different look, but it was probably 1,000 foot wide, deep, the actual sand, from the beachside to the dunes. So you had plenty of area to walk through. And it's quite a carnival atmosphere. There's stands selling food. There is people getting you to hire dune buggies. There's people walking their camels, and you can get on a camel ride. And I'm not talking of one or two. There was hundreds of them. And a lot of families, none of them going in the water for the obvious reasons, but would be just on the shoreline, just enjoying the sound of the sands and the food. And whilst it was a weird thing to go to a beach and see nobody at the water and it was hot, it was fun to do. And I highly recommend. And we were there at sunset, and the sunset was absolutely beautiful. The sunsets over the Arabian Sea there, quite spectacular. So it was a nice way to finish. Personally, I think Karachi's easier access. It's a fascinating city. If you don't want to have the craziness of a city, Islamabad's an easier access point, and it's a lot closer. But the flights themselves aren't long anyway to Skardu. So that's the first day. I'd spend it in Karachi and then get a flight. You've only got two airlines that I know that do it, and the one that was much more recommended, even though it wasn't highly rated at all, was Pakistan International Airways, PIA. And they fly direct to Skardu. And this was described to me beforehand as the most beautiful flight on earth. And having done it, I did the flight to Lukla into Everest, and I thought that was probably the most beautiful flight I've ever done. This smashed it. It was indescribable how stunning it was. The flight is short. From Islamabad, it's under an hour. From Karachi would be 3 hours. But once you get over Islamabad, you start reaching the foothills of the Himalayas, and you actually fly over Nanga Parbat, which is over 8,100 meters. So it's 26,500 feet. It's the ninth highest mountain on Earth. I'll talk about that one later. Rakaposhi, which is also nearly 8,000 meters, and we didn't see it, but on clear days you can see K2. But as you fly over it, you have to go into Skardu's in a valley, surrounded on one side by the Karakoram. It's like in a bowl. And the bottom half of the bowl is the Himalayas, the top half is the Karakoram. The plane has to do circles, decreasing circles to get into the valley. It is a very narrow, high valley. And you just keep getting view after view of the mountains. And everybody, I've never seen a group of people, it was nearly all tourists, just glued to the windows as much as I've ever seen, and lots of ahs moments. It was honestly one of the most beautiful trips. You come into Skardu, you land in the middle of nowhere on a runway, and you then have to get carted by bus about 10 kilometres to the actual airport, the area where you can actually pick up your bags and so on. It's a very small city, only about 3,000 people. The airport is massive. Sadly, the reason is because of the relationship with India. It's primarily a Air Force base. I've been to Ladakh on the other side, and the security is intense on the Indian side. In Pakistan, it was like, no, you can take photos, you can do whatever you like. I was in Ladakh, they had a sign, taking a photo would lead to instant death. So very different to messaging. The Pakistanis were certainly a lot more relaxed about the security. We got out of Skardu. It sits in a high valley. It's already at 7,300 feet. Skardu itself. Probably not high enough to feel, I didn't feel any effects of altitude at all. But it's not long before you start climbing out of it. So Skardu sits in the Indus Valley. Indus is one of the largest rivers in the world, and unfortunately it came to haunt us at the end, and I'll share with you again about why we ended up on the
Subtle
world's most dangerous
foreshadowing
road.
here.
Absolutely. Beautiful river. I've never seen such a big river flow so fast, and it flew a lot faster at the end. But the river is unnavigable. It is as large as the Mississippi, probably but larger in terms of width. Maybe twice as large, even up this far. But with the speed of a whitewater rafting, it's phenomenal. And we got, in the end, bored of taking photos of the rapids because the rapids were just everywhere. But it was spectacular, to say the least. If I can give a tip, a couple of things already. Be very careful when you pick when you're going to come here because of the weather. It's only open for a few months of the year because most of the year it's snowbound. You can go in the snow, but there is a good chance you'll be stuck. And you could be stuck for weeks and months, and people have been. So I would recommend, like when we did, which was July, August, September, but be also aware that's monsoon season, which is, again, as we discovered, has consequences as well. I would arrange a local guide. We just did it through some forums on Facebook. I would just arrange a local guide. They are very cheap. Very good. Arrange a local. It was half the price of what we would have got if we had booked a tour. You can book tours. There's tours that I know are run through, for Australians, which I am, and Americans and so on. But you're going to get much more personalised if you get a tour guide who arranges the driver for you. It's so cheap. We're talking of under $100 a day for the car, the guide, and a driver, and 100 Australians. So what's that? Probably 75 American, so it's not expensive. And accommodation there is between $2 to $10 American a night for reasonable accommodation. I say reasonable, there's no Hiltons or Hyatts there, that's for sure. It is very much small boutique, and boutique is probably with quotation marks because sometimes you'll get a hot shower. Sometimes you won't. Sometimes you'll get running water. Sometimes you won't. And the hotel, it varies. It just depends whether their generators are working. It's never too bad. Yeah, we did have one night with a cold shower, which is not great when you're up in the high mountains. But you just have to lower your standards when you come to this place. The tourism is starting to pick up, but it's certainly not what it is in other parts of the world. But their intent to serve is amazing. They really do love their country. They really love their state that they live in, Gilgit-Baltistan, and they really want to show it off. And they are lovely people, but their infrastructure's got some work to do. But you will find Western toilets pretty consistently, which was my wife's biggest concern.
Sure, yeah.
Those sort of things. And yes, there were some shocking toilets. But if you tell your guides, they would know, being Westerners, can you give us Western-style clean toilets? And that's the advantage of getting a local guide. They'll know those things. The other big tip is when you come to this sort of place, bring multiple photocopies of your visa. Getting the visa was easy. I assume Americans will have to get visas to Pakistan as well. We did. It was easy to get, and it wasn't expensive. I think it was 30 Australian. The process was easy, but I'm glad, again, a local guy told me to print at least 10 copies because you'll go through so many checkpoints because you're basically right up against the Chinese and the Indian borders and the Tajikistan border and Afghanistan border. You're in some areas that are obviously fairly sensitive, and there are regular army checkpoints, which are all fine. None of them we had any problem whatsoever with, but we'll want a copy of it. To be honest, most of the reason that we were told that we needed these and so on is because of deaths by car accidents, which is the most common. The roads up there are notoriously bad. And we've discovered that they are horrific. They're horrific because they do well with these roads, but the Karakoram particularly is a dry mountain range. And when it rains, there's nothing to stabilise it. There's very few trees. Yeah. And so that the whole mountainsides slide off. You can be just lucky or unlucky at times. We survived it, but even while we were there was a number of landslides, which meant that we were stuck for hours until the army came and cleared that up. It is extreme, and I don't know how they'll ever change it because unless they build tunnels into the mountains, because there's just the reality of it. The road quality, when the roads are there, are actually quite good, but the issue is half the time the roads have disappeared under tons of slides. And they just want to make sure that if you haven't got to the next checkpoint, they know where to track where the car's gone down. They use the checkpoint system to know that. Because we asked, why do you have to do so many checkpoints? And they said it's for safety. It's to make sure if something's happened, we know where you were and where you haven't got to next. So it didn't make me feel much confidence, but we got through it.
Now that the holidays are over, you might be feeling like you've got a big spending hangover. The drinks, the holiday foods, the gifts, it all adds up. Luckily, Mint Mobile is here to help you cut back on overspending on wireless this January with 50% off unlimited premium wireless. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network, possibly the network you're paying more for right now. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your own phone number along with all your existing contacts. If you could get the same coverage, why would you pay more? This January, quit overspending on wireless with 50% off unlimited premium wireless. Plans start at $15 a month at mintmobile.com/traveler. That's mintmobile.com/traveler. Limited time offer, upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for a 12 months plan required. $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra, initial plan terms only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. Capable devices required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See mintmobile.com. And thanks to Mint Mobile for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. When your friends are making travel plans, are you the one they call? Do you live for planning the perfect trip, the thrill of comparing hotels, scoring that impossible reservation, piecing it all together to an unforgettable itinerary? You already think like a travel advisor, so why not just be one? Imagine if your love for planning vacations could actually become a source of income. With Fora, you get the training, tools, and insider access to turn your passion into real earnings as a travel advisor, so you can build a thriving part-time business on your terms, all alongside your job, family responsibilities, or other passions. Fora is a modern travel agency built for people who love to plan travel and help others travel well. Their tech platform, training, and community give you everything you need to turn a passion for travel planning into a flexible, meaningful source of income. Become a Fora travel advisor at foratravel.com/traveler. That's FORA travel.com/traveler. And make sure you tell them we sent you. foratravel.com/traveler. And thanks to Fora for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. And you were talking about needing the visas because of the complexity of the borders around there. And they're not right there. They're a little further out, but it is a really interesting place to zoom in on Google Maps because I've never seen so many dotted lines.
Yeah.
It's like the border is here or possibly
That's
here.
Right. Exactly.
Some people say it's here, but we think it's here. It is a region where there is still question marks. In fact, there's one border between Ladakh and Pakistan that the dotted line just stops on Google Maps at some point.
Yeah. I think that
it's,
them trying to be
somewhere over here.
Yeah. It does change regularly, sadly, and if you, depending which side you ask, they'll tell you where the border is, and it's quite different.
Yep,
that's the other thing too. And in terms of itinerary, the first day we got there mid-afternoon after the flight, we went to what we call the Kachura Lakes. and we went straight up to the upper Katura Lake, which is a natural lake. You walk about 30 minutes through these very beautiful local villages to the lake. It's a reasonably steep walk, but at the end of this beautiful lake, which is surrounded by 6,000 metre mountains, so 17 to 19,000 foot mountains, you can go on a fun speedboat. It's the equivalent of what they do in New Zealand, where they do the speedboating. But I can tell you the speedboats didn't have the same quality. The driver was probably more reckless than the Kiwi ones, and also the boat that he was driving looked about 50 years older than the New Zealand jet boats that I was used to. But it was a lot of fun. When we got out, we enjoyed it. We didn't know if we'd make it on the other end, but it was a lot of fun to go on the speedboat around the lake. And in the end, we decided, look, there are some things we said no to. There were some zip lines that I thought, no, and I'm just not, I could see myself plummeting. But
I didn't know if Kiwis were legally allowed to turn down zip lines. But
I'm Aussie, so I can. But yeah, it was,
there you go. Okay.
But they certainly, now Kiwis, they love their zip lines, that's for sure. You can fish there. The whole lake is full of trout. There's trout everywhere through the mountains. Now, it wasn't natural. They brought them up back in the English times, and it meant that trout is a big part of the menu, and the trout is fantastic. Great food. We had a lot of trout up there, and we were eating trout for $1 to $2 whole trout. It was certainly high quality. Also, there was lots of wild apricots. That's the other thing I'll add in. If you go in July, it's considered one of the largest fruit producers in Pakistan. There was just wild apricots everywhere. You could just literally pick apricots off the trees everywhere, and they were delicious. There were wild cherries. There were cherry colours I'd never seen. White cherries, you standard dark cherries. There were the orange cherries, and they're just wild everywhere. And we had mulberries too, wild mulberries. So, to be honest, it was a feast. I don't think I've ever eaten so much fresh fruit from trees. And this is not stealing it from orchards. There's just wild fruit everywhere.
And you mentioned that the mountains have no greenery on them. Mm-hmm. But then what you didn't mention was that the valley is lush green.
Absolutely. It's a bizarre combination. Yeah. Very much like the Ladakh, where there's water from the rivers. And they've done a lot of irrigation for hundreds and hundreds of years using the water. Yeah, it's green. It is islands of green on the lowlands surrounded by these massive mountains, which are particularly more the Karakoram than the Himalayas, really dry and barren. The Himalayas at the mid-heights, they have quite a lot of conifer forests. Okay. It reminds me of, I haven't been to the American Rockies, but it reminded me very much of the Canadian Rockies, the mid-parts, particularly around Banff, just that the mountains were probably another 6,000 feet higher than the Rockies, but very similar. Again, with the lakes and the conifers. Yeah, it's a very interesting scenery. We then went to the Sock Valley, SOQ Valley, again a very steep, almost canyon valley, and the Sock River is obviously what forms it. And we did this regularly. We went with a couple of friends who actually hosted me because I was in Pakistan teaching. And one of his favourite things to do, and we fell in love with it, was sitting in rivers. It's a big thing in Pakistan where they bring tables and chairs, push them into the river. They often dig them into the river so they don't fly away. And you sit there in the water while people come and serve you tea, beers. You can even get beers in Pakistan, which was bizarre. I didn't have any alcohol because I didn't think it was appropriate. But tea, they have great tea, like the Indians, and hot chips. It was a regular thing to have, or fries, as the Americans would call them. So we'd have fries and hot tea, which was the weirdest combination, but it seemed to work up in the high mountains, sitting in the glacial rivers. Until our feet couldn't handle it anymore. But it was...
I was going to say, this water has got to be cold.
Oh, it's glacial. So it would be, I'm guessing, 5 to 10 degrees. But
doing that in Celsius?
Yes, yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'm not sure what that is in Fahrenheit.
Cold. That is cold.
Oh, it is cold, yeah. And it's surrounded by trout farms. It's a beautiful place just to relax. And we spent an hour dangling our feet when we could into this. It was refreshing. It felt like we were in a spa, to be honest. It was fantastic. We finished off going to Lower Katura Lake, which is very touristy. It was man-made, and they've created a resort alongside it called the Shangri-La. It's very much looks like something Chinese with pagodas and so on. It's a very nice resort. You can pay a fee to go in there, and you can spend hours there if you wish. And we did on our last day. I won't go through that, but we did just because we just wanted to relax, and they've got restaurants there. But the first day we went on the other side of the river, which has got no charge for the access. And we preferred that because we could see the sunset over the Shangri-La resort. It was beautiful. You can rent boats on the lake. You can just watch the sunset. Nice way to finish the first day. We went then down to the main street in Skardu, which is called Yagdar Chowk. Chowk means market in Urdu, Pakistani, or also in Hindi, in Indian. And we went to a restaurant called the Peshawar Zoya. Peshawar is an infamous city where Osama bin Laden was once. And basically, Peshawar is a state where there's also very famous food. And I remember we ate an absolute feast, and the total cost for us was $1 for a feast for the two of us. And it was high quality. Look, it didn't look glamorous. My wife was the only female in the place. They were staring at her, not because they were ogling her. They were fascinated, and they were very friendly to her, and there was no problem at all. She didn't feel at all nervous, but they were just intrigued. What are two white people, particularly a blonde white woman, doing in this place? And it was great food, very much like Indian, lots of fantastic breads, naan and the like. Very much meat-based, a lot of shish kebabs, a lot of skewers, a lot of the similar food to Indian, but very much more meat-based. For those of you who've been to India, if you've gone to Rajasthan and had more of the meat-based food there, you'd recognise it.
It sounds almost more Afghani.
It is.
Once you
It would
get
be there.
The skewers and such.
Absolutely. Peshawar was where Osama bin Laden hung out, and it was very close to the border. So the food was very much based on that. You're right. The next day we went to the Shigar Valley. Shigar Valley's famous for a number of reasons. The most famous reason is it's the gateway to K2. It's the way if you go to trek to K2, which we would love to have done, but it's a very long trek and very much more challenging than Everest Base Camp, and we just didn't have the time. But it's the route to K2. You pass through, firstly, a magnificent area called the Safranga Cold Desert. That's one of the highest deserts in the world. It sits at about 7,500 feet. It is pure white sand up against the Himalayas. So it's a beautiful setting with the river as well. You've got the Indus River at the base. We didn't because it was too early in the morning, but you can quad bike there, you can go horse riding, you can go camel trekking, you can trek. We did go back, and I'll talk about later, we watched the sunset from there, which was fantastic, but it is, on its own, it's a really good trip. It's only about 15 kilometres out of a city. You can then get your obligatory photo of, it's as massive as they do a lot with big signs, Shigar, the land of K2, which we did get, and I'll send you some photos so you can put them up. But there's a great photo of that. We hoped it was K2 we'd see behind, but they said, no, there's only a few spots, a bit like Everest, there's only a few spots you can actually see K2 because they're surrounded by so many other large mountains. We didn't get to see K2 this time. If I go back, and I'd love to, it'd be something we'd go to. You're driving up through the mountain ranges, getting more and more elevation. And we went to the Hasupi Garden and Fruit Nursery. It did cost us, I think, about $1 to get in. It sits at the base of a mountain called Kosar Gung, which is a 21,000-foot mountain, spectacular mountain. And there's a glacier there which feeds basically this nursery for gardens and also for fruit trees, and they've got the most beautiful flowers. The flower displays in July because that's really when the weather starts to improve. Even in June and May, it's often snowbound. It's magnificent. It was beautiful flower displays, as well as, again, we were just gorging on. This time they were orchard-based cherries and apricots, but you're welcome to take as many as you like and just eat them. You just can't put them in your bag and take them with you. You can buy them there and eat them as we did. We took them with us for our walking the rest of the trip as well. And then you get to Shigars now in the Karakoram Mountains, which, as I said, definitely have a slightly different look, a lot drier look, but that's where K2 is. And some highlights there are the Serena Shigar Fort. It's part a museum and part now a very upmarket hotel. It's 400 years old. It was wooden. It was built by Hassan Khan, who was the ruler of the Amarcha dynasty. So this was long before when all these states before the English took it
Right.
over. It was a separate nation. And as I said, we went to the Baltistan Museum, which is managed by the royal family still. The royal family still exist in everything but their role. In fact, my friend who was the professor who took us up there, he accidentally wandered into the royal family's house, unbeknownst, trying to find a famous mosque he wanted to show us. And lovely people. Well, we got to meet the royal family. We walked into their backyard and they were having a barbecue. And we got to meet the whole royal family, and they couldn't have been more welcoming. I don't know if I'd highly recommend it as part of your itinerary, but we got to find out where their mosque was as well. But we got to meet the current Amarcha dynasty, and in the museum, we spent 2 hours. The guy who opened and owns the museum is actually part of their family, and it's a really like a 19th century museum. It's fascinating, though. It's got a collection of local history and artifacts. It's a really cool museum to visit. It costs 50 cents, I think, to visit. And after 2 hours, he invited us for tea. So we had tea with one of the cousins of the royal family. And next minute, there were about 20 other people of the royal family came and talked to us, which was complete surprise to us. And it was made very clear that they would like to be a separate nation, which was really interesting to hear. They see themselves as very different culturally to the rest of Pakistan, and their wish is to be seceded from Pakistan. So I learned a lot about their culture and how they are very proud and fiercely loyal. And it was interesting. It is a very different culture. And as I said, when you go up there, you realise the people look very different. We went to the Killingrong Mosque, which was the mosque which was next to the royal family's home. We found it. Beautiful 400-year-old wooden mosque. Nobody's in there. We went in there, and it's a beautiful place. Just the architecture and the woodwork is stunning. We also found another mosque, an even older one, called the Ambrique Mosque, which is 14th century as well. Beautiful woodwork. And we wandered around the town. The town itself is just a beautiful place to wander, seeing natural life. And it took the best part of, we were probably at the town for a good 4 or 5 hours. It's a beautiful little village. I say little, it's big enough to spend 4 hours in. We then took the long drive back to Skardu. It was about a 2 or 3 hour drive. And we finished up before the day ended at Blind Lake. Blind Lake, it's 30 kilometres back from Skardu. It's a long way up. You feel the elevation. You're at 4,100 metres, 13,500 feet. So you could feel it. Beautiful lake, very bumpy road, but thankfully very flat. There was no fear of falling over the edge of a cliff like there is in many other parts, but it was highlights you need to make sure when you get a driver, make sure the car is a four-wheel drive. You will not cope. I was amazed by what little cars, some Hyundais and Kias were going up that people were driving from Islamabad. I'm sure they didn't last the distance because the roads would just chew these up. But the water was clear as clear. You could see massive trout in the water. The water was just pristine colour. There was lush grass, massive stones. We just sat by the lake and actually just watched a glorious sunset over the Karakoram, which was a fantastic way to finish that day. Next day, we went to Mantoka Waterfall, which is a man-made waterfall, which is interesting because there's plenty of non-made ones that we saw, but it's a massive tourist attraction to the Pakistani people. It's a beautiful waterfall. For the waterfall alone, it wouldn't be worth it, but the drive there is worth it. Every direction you go from Skardu is surrounded by mountains. You go this drive along tributary canyons, all of the Indus. You got these rickety, narrow wooden suspension bridges, and you're driving over these suspension bridges, which is something I've never done before, to say the least. We closed our eyes quite a few times when it went across because the drops to the river below would have been sometimes 50 feet, sometimes 500 feet, and straight into tumultuous water. There's no turning back. If something happens to that bridge, that's it. You eventually get to the Mantoka waterfall. It's man-made, but it's 180 feet high, so it's quite high. And of course, there's cafes all around it. You can walk right to the base of the waterfall. If you're brave enough in the cold temperatures, you can swim. Some of the locals were swimming in the pool underneath, and I tried to put my feet in it, and it was icy to say the least. We Then drove down back to the river where there's rapids, which are actually safe to whitewater. We didn't do the whitewater. Again, I just didn't trust that it would be that safe. And I'm glad we didn't, because we saw people getting flown out of their rafts quite regularly. As we sat there, we again found another place where it's a viewing platform to see the whitewater rafting, where you sit on the side of the river in the water again with their tables and chairs. It's a very quirky thing in Pakistan that I've only seen there. And we had more tea and chips. And I will say the Pakistanis make some of the best fries I've ever eaten in my life. They are amazing fries. I don't know what they do about them, but they know how to cook fries. We finished back at Skardu, back at the Safranga cold desert, which is, as I said, the Indus, the major river is. And we just watched this beautiful orange sunset over the peaks. It was just epic. Again, the scenery is just amazing. Our jaws kept dropping at one mountain range after another, one sunset after another. It is certainly, as I keep saying, for those who love mountains, it's fantastic. Next day was one I had never heard of in all my research, but the guide said we had to do it, and he was spot on. The Bashu Valley. Bashu Valley is like B-A-S-H and then with a U. The road is so bad that they only allow local people who actually live in the Bashu Valley to take you up there. They have their much smaller Jeeps, and they can only take the old-fashioned Jeeps up there. They're the only ones who know the road. So your driver, who was also an expert driver, drives you to the start of the valley, across one of the rickety roads again across a river, and then you get taken by locals in their much smaller, enough for 4 people, in their Jeeps. And the drive was, my wife said it was the most nerve-wracking hour of her life. And look, even I, at times, we were, and I've heard so many other people talk about, this one was much scarier than the ones that we did later, like the infamous Karakoram Highway. That was nothing compared to this. This was dirt roads, one way, only one lane. Often there were cars coming the other way, though. You'd have to reverse for a mile before you could find a place. Making sure that there wasn't an error, because you would either hit the mountain on one side or you'd fall 2,000 foot the other side straight into the valley below. Yeah, and the road wasn't good. It was dirt. It was potholes. There was no protection to fall off the edge at all. And I now know why they did the driving. The locals, the men, did all the driving. But it is a spectacular drive into the valley. And the valley, you come up into this valley and you feel like you're in Switzerland. You've got green, lush meadows. The valley itself is about 9,000 feet. You got 20,000 foot mountains in a complete circle. The whole, you turn your head around and you'll see mountains non-stop around it, and not small mountains by any least. There's bears there. We didn't see any, which is probably pleasing. Ibex, snow leopard as well. We kept it close out. I did have my binoculars, because they said you may be lucky to see a snow leopard, which would have been amazing, but we didn't get to see. We hiked around looking if we could actually look up higher in the mountains and see the snow leopards, but to no avail. But it was fun. The walking was magnificent. Beautiful rivers through the meadows as well, and we had some absolutely beautiful trout there. Again, sitting by the river. This time it was too cold to put our feet in, but they have these sort of beautiful decks where you sit out over the river. You hang over the river on rugs and just sit on these overhanging benches over the river. And they came up and fed you trout, and it was beautifully cooked with fries, of course, again. It was one of the most surreal days, because the drive itself was terrifying, and you come to this almost, look, I'd only been in Switzerland in July, and I could have swear I was in, it was green, lush, very different to everything else I'd seen so far.
Starting the year with a wardrobe refresh, Quince has you covered with luxe essentials that feel effortless and look polished. They're perfect for layering, mixing, and building a wardrobe that lasts. Their versatile styles make it easy to reach for them day after day. I don't know about you, but I've gotten to the point where I'm tired of wearing clothes that don't make me feel good and look good. I'm tired of going cheap when I could go upmarket, and even better, doing it with Quince, where I don't have to pay extra for that benefit. It's sweater weather here in Northern California, and I'm wearing my Mongolian cashmere crewneck sweater today, which is oh so soft. Quince has all the staples covered, from soft Mongolian cashmere sweaters that look like designer pieces without the markup, to 100% silk tops and skirts for easy dressing up, to perfectly cut denim for everyday wear. Their wardrobe essentials are crafted to last season after season, and that is important to me. I'm looking for the clothes that I like to wear that don't break the bank, and Quince is giving me that. Refresh your wardrobe with Quince. Don't wait. Go to quince.com/traveler for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. This episode is sponsored by Rocket Money. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. I'm not sure if you know, but before I retired, I was a director of engineering for a large bank/credit card company working on financial planning tools. And so I needed to know what was available. And Rocket Money was one of those tools that was doing things we weren't. With Rocket Money, you connect it to your bank accounts and it monitors your transactions. It looks for things that you are spending that are subscriptions. Have you ever had where you're paying for a streaming service and it's been a year since you've watched it? I hate that. And this is a tool that helps you fix that. Not only that, but when you discover that you're subscribed to something, you can often fix it in the Rocket Money app with just a few clicks. You don't have to pick up the phone and you don't have to call them. It also automatically categorizes your expenses, helps you keep track of them, and other cool stuff. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join rocketmoney.com/traveler. That's rocketmoney.com/traveler. rocketmoney.com/traveler. And thanks to Rocket Money for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Day 6, so we're well into it now. So this will be a shorter one, I hope, although I saw we're nearly in an hour again. The DSI planes, you have to go there to the last spot that I'm talking about. And I think your previous one mentioned the DSI planes, but he came from the other side. We came from Skardu. On the way, there's a Buddhist rock they'll take you to. It's a very old carved, massive rock. It would be 30 foot high by about 20 foot wide. It would be before Christ, a beautiful carved Buddha, showing that it was originally obviously Buddhist before it became Muslim. And a beautiful carving of Buddha, which is beautifully preserved. You then drive up very steep mountains to a dam, which is basically gives all the water for Skardu and the surrounding villages. And you climb up to 14,600 feet to one of the highest plains on Earth, the DSI plains. It's, again, that's very different. We keep on saying, I feel like I'm in Scotland now, rolling green hills. Once you get up to the high points, the hills are quite small, relatively, but just fields and fields of flowers. I have never seen, in June we're in Switzerland, and we thought we'd seen the most beautiful carpets of wildflowers I'd ever seen. This place took the cake. It had fields and fields. Every field had different colours, blues, yellows, reds, but carpeted. And where there wasn't wildflowers, it was beautiful green grass, rivers going through it. It's got the highest concentration of Asian bears, brown bears, I think, in the world. We didn't see one. We were hoping we'd see one in the car while we were driving, but other people did see them. We just didn't see them. We had an amazing lunch at the highest point. Basically, the highest point, it's tent camp where people can camp and they have tented kitchens. And we went into a kitchen surrounded by locals only. We were the only non-locals. And we had fantastic meal there with the local farmers. Yeah, I think part of the fun is just immersing yourself with these people. They are just so friendly and warm. I'm amazed by how many can speak English despite their lack of tourism. And they're just so warm and engaging. And the food was fantastic, but you could see the glow in their faces when my wife particularly said how much they loved the food. Bearing in mind she was often the only woman wherever we went. It's very much a male-dominated society up there in terms of where you see them. But she felt very welcoming and never felt out of step. And on that, she never had to wear any dress other than normal Western dress.
Hmm.
Mosque, same rule as always. You had to cover her head for that.
Sure.
And not expose her knees and so on. But when you're traveling, you can wear whatever you like. Beautiful lakes as you drive through the plains. We then left through the very remote, and it does get very close to Kashmir, which we can't as Australians. I'm not sure if the Americans can visit Pakistani or Indian Kashmir. We can visit, but we don't have our insurance. So we made sure we told everybody. They wanted to take us into Kashmir, and I said, no, if something happens here, we're not covered. But we were literally in the valley alongside. We were running parallel to Kashmir by this stage. The Astor Valley is at the other end. It is, again, green as green, lush, steep mountains, wonderful honey. They have this particular honey from all of these different flowers. So they have a very seasonal honey, and we bought some of the honey there. It was fantastic. It was a very long drive by this stage. It's a long drive. We went to a town called Gorikot. We spent the last 3 hours driving through roads that I'm glad I didn't see because it was pitch black. And this valley is remote. We didn't think we'd ever get to our accommodation. And the reason we had to drive so far was for the last day, which I'll talk about. So we got to Gorikot about 9 o'clock. We went to a local restaurant which had no power. There was very little power there at all. It's very variable, and if it happens, it's daytime. The restaurant was run by a generator. There was no lights. It was all candlelight. So I wouldn't say it was a romantic candlelight, but it was fascinating to eat in candlelight. And we had, again, in the most remote little village, mountain village, this fantastic meal with some of the most beautiful breads that I've ever eaten, and just fantastic meats and sauces, and again, barely paid a cent. I want to emphasize how clean it is. I was stunned. I was misconceived. I had a conception that Pakistan could be quite dirty, and to be honest, I've travelled to India 14 times, and I know you've been, Chris. You've got to be careful where you eat there. And you'd have to be careful here too. That's why it's great to have a local guide, but it was so clean. And the rubbish, there was hardly any rubbish on the ground. It's a very clean country other than Karachi. Karachi did feel like I could have been back in India with the rubbish, but it was very clean and felt very safe to eat. The reason we did this long drive to Gorikot is Gorikot sits at the base of Nanga Parbat, which I think your previous, but he went the other side. If I could recommend anybody to get a chance to see mountain scenery, and as I said, I've done a lot. I've been to the Rockies, I've been to Swiss Alps, I've been to Himalayas, I've been to the Andes, and I've been right down to the bottom of Torres del Paine. Amazing places, but Nanga Parbat would be the most awe-inspiring day I've ever seen of mountains. And I thought the Himalayas were amazing, but it's because you get so close to an 8,000 metre mountain. There's only, I think, 14 on Earth. And you start with this drive through Rupal, Rupal, and it's a brilliant local village, full of colour. Everybody looks like they're in a culture village that you're visiting, because they're all decked out in their local gear, but it's all genuine. Loveliest people in this mountain town. You then walk to the base camp. Most people, and in fact 95%, if not higher, of the tourists go to the other side called the Fairy Village. And it is beautiful, the other side, from what I see in the photos. What you get to go here, though, is to go to the base camp where the mountain climbers go from. So it's called Killer Mountain for a reason. It's not the highest death rate. I think that's Annapurna. And more die in Everest simply because of climbing, but it's got one of the worst climb records on Earth. Sadly, the day before we arrived, a Czech woman had actually fallen and died where we were. The walk to base camp was moderate. I think if you've got any reasonable level of fitness, and if you took poles with you, if you've got some issues with your knees, you'd still be fine. It was longish, but not hard. And that's probably the other joy is most access to other 8,000 metre mountains is long hikes, long multi-day hikes.
Mm-hmm.
This is from a village, and you can be there in 2 hours, 3 hours, and the scenery you're looking up above you, you're seeing the Nanga Parbat is just a beast of a mountain. It's massive. And the biggest tip is once you get to base camp is not to stop. Don't follow the main path. We're so glad that we just followed our own path. It was probably created, to be honest, by yaks, because there are yaks everywhere up the top there. It wasn't a path, but we followed a ridge. We could see a ridge, and then you couldn't see anything. We knew that must be that must be the high point. Like all mountains, when you get up there, it looks a lot closer than it really is. But we got there after about an hour from the base camp. But the walk there was great because you're surrounded by yaks, marmots, again, wildflowers. Again, I didn't expect to see wildflowers at this level. You're at about 11,000 feet at this point. But you're surrounded by some of the biggest glaciers I've ever seen and the mountain itself. And you come to what they call the Rupal Face. It's the highest rock face on Earth. It's the longest. It's 15,100 foot of almost vertical rock. So it makes Half Dome look punsy. But it's like Half Dome on steroids. It's this vertical rock face. And because it's so steep, there's very little snow on it. And so as a result, it's just startlingly dramatic. You can see right up at times with the cloud broke, and it cloud would swirl in and out, but we managed to get some of the most magnificent photos I've ever taken of the mountain and all the glaciers descending from the mountain. We just sat there watching this for probably an hour or two. With literally, I can't even describe how magnificent it was. Sitting on rocks with lawn, grass all around you, with fields of flowers, and one of the highest mountains on Earth. It looks like somebody painted it right up against your nose. It's right up against your face. And I think that's, as I said, I don't know any other massive mountain you can get so close to. So we came back to relax in the base camp, which was a lot easier because you're going downhill. They've got tents there, and you can camp there. There's no bathroom, but you can camp there. But lovely people who man the camp and great chefs. We had a magnificent soup, mountain soup full of potatoes and chicken that was just fantastic, which is what you need at that cold high levels. Had some beautiful tea as usual. We didn't have fries that time. And then we stayed again in Gorakut. So we went back to Gorakut forlornly, sadly, because the walk was easily one of our favourite walks ever. We would say that, and the one we did in Argentina, we went to Fitzroy. And I would say those two are my favourite hikes I've ever done. It was amazing. And it's a day hike, and I wouldn't even say it's hard, it's just long. So there's two options then from Gorakot. You can then drive to Gilgit, which is where your last presenter started. That's about a 3-hour drive. And you can fly, and you can then go on and do Gilgit, which is just as equally beautiful place, but a lot more touristed. Or you can fly then back from Gilgit to Islamabad. Gilgit's flights are more variable because they use propeller planes and navigation is only by eye. So they get a lot more cancelled flights because of the weather. However, I will finish off with, we drove back to Skardu after going to Gilgit to get our return flight, and the weather turned ugly. Our flight got cancelled, and after 2 hours of wondering if it was going to happen, it got cancelled. We had to get a flight to get home to Islamabad. It's an 11-hour ride in a car on the world's most dangerous road. And we had to do that overnight in pouring rain. We just made it to Islamabad airport, and I just made it. It was horrific. It was probably the most scary 11 hours. There was dead silence. In this car had 8 of people in it because a lot of people, everybody was trying to negotiate to get a car to get down. We had a driver who was crazy, I'll be honest. He looked like he was trying to learn how to race in a Grand Prix, and we had to tell him to slow down sometimes. It was because you're driving through waterfalls. We knew something was brewing, and it was. By the time we got to Islamabad, by this stage, they're freeways, really good, beautiful roads, but the freeways were under a wheel arch level of water. It was getting quite scary. We were the only flight that took off that day, and later that day, 900 people died from floods. We knew it was brewing. It was some of the worst floods in history in Pakistan. So that is probably not a great way to finish, but just to highlight that it is a wild ride up there, but it's not for what I thought it would be. When people said we were going to Pakistan, I was going there for work because I was teaching. People said, "Why are you doing Pakistan?" I loved mountains and I liked challenging places. It wasn't challenging for the reasons I thought. The people were lovely. They're just such lovely people. The food quality was great. I never once got sick. I never felt like I was going to get sick. The only safety issue is the rain and the roads. And I think the roads without the rain would be fine. They're actually quite well made, but they get destroyed so regularly. The quality of the roads when they're not destroyed, except for the Bashu Valley, which is built by the local people. They created their own road. That's the only time where it was dirt. The rest of them are bitumen roads. I'm not sure what you call them in America, but
Asphalt.
Asphalt roads. But half the time they're washed away, and then they have to find divergence and work around it. But they get there. You'll get there. But sadly, monsoons are becoming a bigger issue. Floods are becoming a bigger issue. And the biggest issue in the north, as we discovered speaking to them, is not only are the floods getting more violent, but because it's getting warmer, the glaciers are melting. So there's a lot more water than there ever was. So their biggest concerns is not just is the flooding is becoming more regularly because of the glacier melt, but also will these towns be sustainable in 20 years? Is a concern, same concern as I heard when we were in Ladakh, was how much longer can we be here because of the issues with the glaciers. But that's my summary. My summary is, if you like a wilder trip, some of the most amazing mountain scenery with, honestly, some of the nicest people you would ever meet, it's a fantastic trip. But be prepared, have lots of paperwork printed. Not that you'll have any problems whatsoever. I'm glad I did. I'm glad I listened to my wife. If I hadn't, we may have had to finding a photocopier in a town in the middle of nowhere to download an email. May not have been easy. They just bring a lot of paper copies. Be prepared to be stuck at times with road landslides. We were 2 or 3 times. Be patient. And just on that, Pakistanis have a very different definition of time.
Sure.
Very different definition of time. I got told to be ready by 6:30 today because it's going to be a long hike, and at 9 o'clock the guide would turn up. And so now we have to have breakfast, which for an Australian is so hard for us to cope, particularly somebody like me who's so particular about time. Yeah, look, if you've got an open mind, it's a fantastic place. It is a cheap place, and I'll send the photos to you. Hopefully you'll see how fantastic the scenery is. I'm not overselling this place at all.
And I'm going to start to wrap us up here because our short show is over an hour. The questions that I think we probably already know the answers. You're standing in the prettiest spot.
Yeah.
Where are you standing?
It's definitely on that ridge above the base camp at Nanga Parbat on the Rupal, watching the Rupal rock face. It's
and besides eating in the rivers, one thing that makes you laugh and say only in Pakistan.
When they tell you that you have to be ready early, and 2.5 hours later they turn up, and then still said we've got to now have breakfast. So, yeah, that's certainly something I've experienced. Occasionally that everywhere else, but never so consistently as in Pakistan.
That's funny. And if you had to summarize Skardu in just 3 words, what 3 words would you pick?
Water.
Okay.
Mountains. And people. Yeah,
okay.
People. Yeah.
Excellent. Our guest again has been James Schomburgk. And I suspect he'll be back on again talking about some other far-flung destination. James, thanks so much for coming back on the show and talking to us about your obvious love for Skardu, Pakistan.
Thanks, Chris. This is always a joy to be back. Thank you.
Thanks to my guest, James, and special thanks to the patrons of the show who help support Amateur Traveler financially. If you're interested in learning more about becoming a patron of the show, go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. I heard at the end of your most recent episode that you're collecting a list of places people went because of the Amateur Traveler podcast for your updated media kit. My wife and I went to Paraguay in April after listening to Travel to Paraguay, Amateur Traveler episode 709. We also extended a recent Egypt trip to spend an extra day in Cairo and a day in Saqqara/Memphis after listening to Travel to Cairo, Egypt, Amateur Traveler episode 965. I've been to 72 countries, and visiting Saqqara was one of my favorite travel experiences ever. Thanks for inspiring some great adventures and unforgettable memories, Drew. And thanks, Drew. I did update my media kit. Drew's quote is in there. If you have any quotes of places that you have been because of Amateur Traveler, I'm going to be starting to collect them for next year's media kit. So just drop me an email. Still looking for 2 people to go with me to Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan in May. Please join me. With that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to chris2x@gmail.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And as always, thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more cathedral. I got to sit in